It's me again. All right, everyone. We're going to go ahead and kick this off. We have a few folks who are still going to be joining us. But again, thank you so much for taking time. My name is Jose Ocayo. I am the Senior Director of Culture and Talent here at Best Friends. What does talent mean in terms of what I do? We think of our talent as our volunteers and our staff. And I'm just really excited to share the next hour with some amazing leaders across the country who are doing some really great work in terms of how they're engaging their staff and their volunteers during these really, unprecedented times that we're in. So again, just thank you so much. Just another reminder, we do these town halls every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure to keep an eye out for them. We want to make sure that we're connecting to all of you and delivering content that really helps you with everything that you're experiencing under these COVID circumstances. So each week, in addition to the content we also have Dr. Erin Katribe, who is our medical director for Best Friends, who's going to kick us off in a few minutes to just kind of any medical updates regarding the CDC and companion animals. So we're going to hear from her. And also, if you haven't heard, there is now a B2B Best Friends podcast. In addition to this webinar, so today's episode, the episode that actually just launched today is called Compassionate Badassery, which I love that title. And it really focuses on our own emotional well-being and managing compassion fatigue in this really difficult time within our industry. So a few just housekeeping things before we actually get Dr. Erin to share some of the information she has. We want to let everyone know everyone is automatically muted for this portion of the webinar so that you don't have to worry about accidentally unmuting yourself, or if you're like me, you accidentally never put yourself on mute and you have a full-on personal conversation and your colleagues get the pleasure of hearing that. That was fun, not embarrassing at all. If you have any questions at any point, please type it in the chat box. We are reserving the last 15 minutes of this hour for questions. But if we find questions that are really relevant to the topic, we also may be picking some of those questions out as well. And also, this webinar is being recorded and it will be available to everyone on our website after. And so again, and finally, after the Q&A, there is a short survey to gather information about this webinar and upcoming webinars. Again, this is for you. So we want to make sure the content that we are developing for these town halls is something that is really beneficial, impactful, and relevant to everything that you are curious about and that you're experiencing. So again, today's town hall is actually on staff and volunteer morale. We're going to be talking with leaders across the country on methods they use to keep employees and volunteers safe, happy, healthy through these extremely challenging times. But before I go and introduce our phenomenal set of panelists, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Erin, who is going to give us an update. So Dr. Erin, how are you?
I'm great, thanks, Jose. So for veterinary and CDC updates this week, the first thing that I have for all of you is we did have the first dog in the US test positive, but similar to previous weeks, this case doesn't really change anything. It doesn't change our messaging. We know it's exceedingly rare, but animals can get this disease. We actually had 2 previous dogs from Hong Kong several weeks ago. But we know animals get this disease from people, and still there is no evidence that they can transmit the disease to us. So no change in messaging there. I think the biggest update and the topic that is on everybody's minds this week is spay neuter. So in lots of parts of the country, restrictions are being lifted on elective surgeries. Some of the stay-at-home orders are ending. And so I just want to share, if you don't know yet, there is a COVID-19 spay, neuter, and wellness clinic preparedness guide that was published online. It's hosted on the Best Friends website, and I can share that link in the chat after I finish. So this guide, it's more than being a prescriptive kind of guidance on exactly when you should open and what you should be doing. It's more of an assessment for you, some questions for you to ask yourself, and for you to really look at your clinic, your shelter, and your community. So I know we all want it, but there's not really an easy answer on when we should start spay neuter. It's going to depend on a lot of factors, not the least of which is the COVID status on new cases in your community. So if you all remember, there's two reasons, right, why we pressed pause on spay neuter. The first was medical supplies, to preserve those for human healthcare as well as for our own emergency procedures. But the other big piece of this is the human-to-human contact from our staff. So if COVID cases are still increasing in your community, perhaps it doesn't yet make sense to restart spay neuter in a big way, as that can put your staff at greater risk. So one key point, I do think it makes a lot of sense to stage reopening. So as you can imagine, there are some populations of animals that we can serve in a spay neuter clinic more safely. So community cats are the big one that we're all talking about starting up if we even stopped in the first place. We can, it's only contact with 1 or 2 people to bring in a batch of cats or transport them, as compared to public, where you might have a human attached to every, a different human attached to every animal that's coming in. Additionally, depending on anesthetic protocols, we can do cats a lot of times while still maintaining 6 feet of physical distancing between staff, whereas with a big unruly dog, that may not be the case. So in regards to public animals, also, I think many clinics are planning to start with much smaller numbers when they get to the point of engaging the public again. So maybe 25 to 50% of normal to try out some of their processes and things like that, even when we do get there. The CDC does have some guidelines that are newer that talk about additional personal protective equipment. One I would call out is it includes eye protection when dealing with animals with upper respiratory disease, and so that one's a new one. But just in general, the guide it's a big document. There's lots of links. It contains a lot of really good information. So I encourage everybody to check it out. Think about all those factors that are at play in your shelter and your community, and then work with your veterinary team to make a plan for a phased ramping up of spay, neuter, and other services. And then just as a final comment, I would say, we all know these situations are super fluid. So, understand that you may start spay, neuter next week and then have to shut it down again the following week, depending on what's happening in your community. So we all have to be willing to pivot as the situation changes. And I think we've all gotten really good at that these past few weeks. So, so that's what I have for all of you. I will stick around. If you do have any medical veterinary questions, pop them in the Q&A and we can potentially answer those. With that, I will pass it off to our amazing panel.
Thank you so much, Dr. Erin, for spending some time with us. All right, I'm really excited to start and digging into these wonderful women who have graciously agreed to be part of and share, their brain trust and their experience. So our very first panelist is my new friend, Jan Walker, who is the new executive director for Lynchburg Humane Society in Virginia. So Jan, welcome. Hello, good to see you. The next is someone who really means a lot to me in my life. She is a professional development coach. Her name is Meryl Schwartz. And Meryl is someone that I personally call on through personal and professional challenges and peaks and valleys. And so, Meryl, I'm so honored to have you as part of this panel. So good to see you. Another new friend that I recently made is Nancy McKinney. She is the president and CEO of Marin Humane in Northern California. Nancy, so great to see you. And kicking it old school, one of my colleagues from several years ago, we presented together actually at a Best Friends conference. Anna Stout is the executive director of Roy's First Humane Society in Colorado. And there we go. And then finally, another new friend. We talked yesterday and talked about someone who's just so inspiring. She's been in this industry for 19 years. Michelle Whaley, she's the animal shelter director for Pitt County Animal Services in North Carolina. Hello, women. It's so wonderful to see everybody, and I'm really excited for us to dig in and talk about this really, I think, important topic, which is staff and volunteer morale. So, Meryl, I want to, from your perspective, as a professional and personal coach with a master's degree in education and in psychology, how do we keep our spirits up during all of this uncertainty, fear, and chaos, and what seems to be like the constant change?
That's a great question. I don't have an answer, so I'll leave now. So it really is so important to keep our spirits up right now. And you guys are going to be getting a handout from me at the end of this session. So don't worry about taking notes or remembering every single thing I say. I'm going to focus right now on just 2 specific strategies to keep our spirits up. And the first thing I want to tell you about is actually a resource as opposed to a strategy. I highly recommend the website greatergood.berkeley.edu. That's an organization where their entire reason for existing is to provide us with scientifically based research on how to live better, more meaningful lives. And I would say that right now, we really all need that resource. So I want you to be careful if you're going online, because there are times when there's a lot of woo-woo stuff out there, okay? So I want you to really know what a good resource is. And so greatergood.berkeley.edu is a great resource. And I recently found on there a list of 6 questions that they recommend that we ask ourselves every single day to deal with life as it is and to help us appreciate life more. Okay, so I'm going to read you the list of questions, and I'm not going to spend much time on all of them until I get to the last one. So the first question is, who am I checking in with or connecting with today? It's way too easy for the day to go by and we don't remember to connect with somebody. So if you ask yourself that question and remember to do it, that's setting you on the right track. A big one, what expectations of normal am I letting go of? Okay, try all of them and you'll be in good shape, all right? Things are not normal right now. How am I getting outside today? Now, depending on the weather, sometimes it's not fun to go outside, but you want to at least open your door and smell the fresh air for a minute or two. Okay? You can do little things. How am I moving my body today? Same thing. You don't have to exercise for a half hour to get benefit out of moving your body. Do what Jose just did. Just move around a little bit and you'll be fine. Okay? What beauty am I cultivating or inviting into my life today? And beauty can be anything from cooking a fabulous meal to making your hair look beautiful. So those are the first 5 questions to ask yourselves. The question I want to spend a little time on is gratitude. What am I grateful for today? Gratitude is so cliche at this point that I really feel the need to point out to you that it's only become cliche because it works, but the fact that it became cliche means you're not getting all the information you need about it. So gratitude is not a neck up endeavor, okay? For gratitude to work, it's got to come from the heart. So I'm going to give you 3 quick steps on how you can effectively practice gratitude each day. First, I want you to carve out 5 uninterrupted minutes. That means no devices anywhere, okay? You can have some soft music playing, but no devices. I want you to sit down with paper and pen, not with your laptop or your iPhone, okay? Paper and pen. And then I want you to write down something you're grateful for. After you write the statement, stop, take a breath, close your eyes. Repeat to yourself the statement that you just wrote until you feel like it's getting in, and follow that process. Thank you, Jose. And follow that process until your 5 minutes are up. That will get the gratitude to move from your head to your heart. Neuroscience research tells us you got to spend 15 to 30 seconds thinking about something or really experiencing it for it to get in. So that's the purpose of that exercise. Okay? And finally, keep an eye on yourself. If you feel your morale is getting low, come back to these questions. Really start practicing it, okay? Because the best thing you can do for yourselves, your families, your friends, your animals is to keep your own morale high.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And speaking of morale, Nancy, what key steps has Marin Humane taken to measure employee morale? Ooh, where'd you go? Maybe you were going to press unmute.
Click the wrong button.
I was like, I think that's what happened.
Sorry about that. So what we did at Marin Humane is we surveyed our staff right when we knew that the shelter in place was going to take effect. We asked them what sort of things they might need, from computer equipment to internet connections at home. We didn't want to presume everybody could work from home and had a laptop. So we surveyed them right in the beginning of the shelter in place, the first shelter in place order. Then a couple of weeks into it, we did a different type of survey. We just used SurveyMonkey and sent it out to all our staff and asked them how they were doing. and we asked them to rate how were we doing and communicating with them, and what did they need, and any other suggestions. So we made sure of that. And then in the third phase, we decided to call our employees. Personally, myself and 2 other senior managers, we're calling them as we start week 7 here in Northern California. We're calling them and checking in with them. So we're doing a variety of ways to check on their morale. And then also, whenever I send out official communications to the whole staff, we're also gauging the types of questions they're asking us or their direct supervisors if there's a different link there. So we're constantly trying to kind of see how the questions are, we're trying to see how the responses are, and we're trying to show sincerely that we are concerned about how they're coping. And that's the way we have this periodic check-in in different ways, in different manners, to see how the morale's going.
When you told me when we spoke that your team was calling all 100 plus of your employees and that the leadership team was doing that, I thought that was just one of the most beautiful sentiments of just like really meaningfully connecting with someone. And bravo, I just like love it. If anyone has capacity to do that, I think that is really cool. And I think with so much of this stuff too, with because we've been doing some surveying as well with our staff at Best Friends, and one of the things that has come up is like finding opportunities to have fun, and integrating that. And so, Michelle, I was listening to the Best Friends podcast, and I learned about what you and your organization was doing. And so I would love for you to tell us about that, and what are some ways you're integrating fun amid all of this time, this crazy time right now?
Sure. So I'm not like Nancy, so we're a small shelter. So I call us the little shelter that could and will do and whatever. But the first week we were getting everybody out into foster, and we don't really have usually a foster program. So we were like super excited by the end of week 1 with empty kennels. So we started with a lip sync video and did it to Don't Worry, Be Happy, because we wanted to kind of highlight the empty kennels because it doesn't usually happen for us. So the second week, though, I started seeing just no one was saying anything but the strain on different employees' faces. It was like that unspoken strain. So I don't know where I came up with it, but I decided everybody was going out in the parking lot. We could social distance 6 feet apart. We're behind a lovely trash dump or recycling center, and they're like, people are looking at us. I don't care. People try to hide in the bathrooms and all of a sudden have something to do. I got on the intercom, everybody report to the parking lot, and we started dancing. So the first day was the cha-cha slide because, it gives directions. I figured that might be easier. Then I started letting staff pick songs. And it was funny because at the very first dance, one of my kind of quiet, reserved shelter attendants was like, I hate to admit it, but like I do feel better. So it just lightened up the mood. It gave us a few minutes. It didn't take very long. And it just got everybody's mind off it. We could laugh at each other. So then I started letting them pick songs. We've done the Macarena. We've done the chicken dance. We did YMCA. And I was the dummy. I'm the director, and I'm doing the backward C because I don't know what I'm doing. But it was just really fun. So then we just started kind of weekly dance parties and filming them, and it just broke the tension up. So you almost have to take it back to elementary school days, sidewalk chalk, paint, and we didn't even have poster boards. We used cardstock, that we use. And I said, you can write a word. And it doesn't have to be a nice word if that's what you're feeling. You can draw a picture. And so at this time, everybody's going to stop and we're going to paint bubbles. So this week, because we did random karaoke in the office. So we've done decades. We've done Disney. We're not really good singers or dancers, we've discovered. This week, though, we're really missing, our volunteers are not there because the animals aren't there, which is a great problem to have. But we were missing more of the engagement with our volunteers and the public. So this week we launched Spirit Week. And we're encouraging everyone to participate and tag us on social media with their pets. And that's been fun because we're interacting more. So like tomorrow's Fancy Friday, today was Throwback Thursday. So it's really been fun to not only engage with each other internally, but also with our community and our volunteers and people we're missing that we're used to seeing. So you know, I really just say if you have kids or people with kids, ask what they do in school for spirit weeks or to break up the monotony and fun. And I don't have all the answers, but it really has, I think, gotten to see each other in different light, and staff that's usually so isolated in their roles and in their boxes, and the officers maybe don't really interact with the shelter staff. It's kind of brought us all together as a unit. So that wasn't even my intention. It was just really to break up the strain, but it's been a lot of fun.
That's so cool. And you know, this is a good, information when Dr. Hurley texts me that this is so heartwarming, hearing all the stuff that's being shared. So shout out to Dr. Hurley who's on the call listening too. Heart you. One of the things that you talked about too was, connecting more and communicating with like your volunteers and kind of bridging that. And so, Anna, I'm curious, what have you changed? Have you changed your communication in either mode or frequency since this has happened, and how has your staff responded? Because we know communication is a big topic surrounding this whole staff morale and volunteer morale.
Yeah, this was something that we early on, when things sort of started hitting the fan in our community, we realized that if we did not communicate with our staff early and frequently, we were going to have a much longer and harder road ahead of us, just in terms of how they approach this crisis. So we called our leadership team together, in the first day after everything sort of went crazy around here, and came up with a plan. Fortunately, we had already been working for a year on an emergency plan. So it was, and then earlier this year, we had worked on a succession plan. So we were already sort of in this mode of communicating about worst case scenarios. And then, we brought our entire staff together actually a couple days earlier than planned when things changed in our community. So we had a plan, and then we suddenly had a positive case, and that changed our entire plan. And we came together and we brought somebody from our health department in. We had a veterinarian come and talk to us about exactly what this would mean at that point with the knowledge we had for our animals and everything else. And we wanted to communicate both positivity that, this was an opportunity. From the very first day that we met, we talked about what we were going to, the ways that we wanted to grow from this, what we were going to learn from this, and the opportunities that would come out of this for us. But then we realized that, things were evolving so quickly that we couldn't rely on our regular staff meetings, which are weekly, or on our email threads, which are, often too much. So we created a WhatsApp group that was just for this. And so we have a staff Facebook page where they can share all the goofy memes and ridiculous things they want. But this was our designated mode of communication for the crisis. And we wanted it to stay that way so that we could dispatch updates very quickly. You didn't have to sift through anything, and it wouldn't be taken over, by just an oversharing of other information. So that was one of the first things we did. We also increased the frequency of our leadership team meetings to twice a week. So we start our Monday mornings with them, and we close our Friday afternoons with them to make sure that we're addressing anything that comes up throughout the week and that we're preparing for the week ahead. And then we really just made sure that anything that happened, however insignificant it might be, that was perceived as a change was communicated to our staff as quickly as possible, and to our volunteers as well. We've tried really hard, some of this is not exciting information to hear. One of the messages we had to send to our volunteers was that we don't anticipate opening the volunteer program up anytime soon, and that when we come back to a new kind of normal, it's not going to look like the shelter they left. And so having to deliver that message was something we could have waited until we weren't opening back up the way that we used to, but instead we decided to sort of front load that early on, explain to them the rationale behind it, and why we're making this decision, what it's going to mean for animal welfare. So it's just been our absolute key to all of this has been communicating early and communicating frequently. And what we've seen is my staff, they've been champions through this. From the very first day when we assured them, one of the main talking points was, your jobs are safe. We're going to keep you whole. We're going to make it through this. We talked, I met with my board president the very first day that this happened. And we made sure that we had a plan for keeping our staff and sort of figured out what was going on from there. And we found that everything we asked our staff to do, which was in many cases so far outside of their job descriptions that they were doing things that they never signed on for. but they have done it with so much optimism, so much positivity. And they've handled this. You wouldn't know walking in our shelter that there's a crisis happening in the world right now, because they've been so calm about it and just so informed and optimistic. And you can ask my staff members questions that you can ask members of the community about the disease, about the pandemic and everything else. And they're so well informed that they can answer those questions. And I think that has taken a lot of the fear out of everything that's happening around us.
Yeah, I think that's something that also our CEO, Julie Castle, did right away. We use Workplace as a means of internal communication, and every day, and we still have them, but she was going live on Workplace, connecting with people, and it actually has connected us more than we ever have been at Best Friends. You know, we're a large organization across the whole country, so that was no small feat. And so, Jan, I'm curious, you know, in kind of the spirit of conversation, how have you helped staff understand your organization's financial challenges with all of this without alarming them or overwhelming them? Because I think that's been something that I think people are struggling with, of how much transparency to give out.
Well, I'll play off of Anna's words. You described it exactly, Anna, in that it's transparency. It's about not being afraid to tell people what the situation really is, because all of our staff, as soon as they saw that this impact had reached the Virginia area, it did so in mid-March. You know, we started reducing our contact with our public at our main site. We closed a secondary shelter. We shut down our spay and neuter clinic. All of those changes came very quickly because our community reached that point here in the state of Virginia. And when they saw those changes, they were in a position of understanding that this was going to impact them as well. And immediately it did. We reduced our staffs. We divided them into 2 teams so that we had alternating teams coming and going from our primary locations, so that if we did have contact with the virus, it didn't put all of our staff in quarantine at any one moment. And so what that did to them personally was it also reduced the hours that they were earning their wages. And so it was an immediate, quick impact that we all felt. And so we immediately were meeting with board members to talk to them about what our strategies would be. And I've mentioned before, I've got a strong leadership team, and we all huddled to talk about what do we think the strategies need to be, and how do we communicate these with our staff. And Anna, you touched on it. You do it through a lot of different methods. Some of that is conference phones, some of that is email. We use Slack as our internal communication bulletin board like. So repeatedly, often messages with clear information that people can understand it without getting into so much detail that it sounds like blah, blah, blah to them. So every message we send is, this is the big picture of, this is the reason behind some of the actions that we're taking, and here's how it's going to impact you personally. The clear message right from day one that we wanted our staff to understand was, we're going to do everything we can to take care of you, because you can't take care of our mission and you can't take care of our pets unless you feel safe. And so much of our communications was built around making that staff member feel safe, understand what's happening, understand why it's happening, and being real clear about how it would impact them. And a lot of the decisions that we made, we had some employees, I've already mentioned, we had some who had a half schedule all of a sudden. So they were eligible, for example, for partial unemployment. So helping those employees understand that they're eligible for that, and to help them through the process of applying for that benefit. We offered that as assistance. We had about 15 employees out of 60 who were furloughed completely. They're not working at all. They're still not working today. And for those, again, helping them understand what options they had in terms of filing for unemployment, but also for all of these employees who were impacted either by half-time schedules or being completely furloughed, we made the decision early on that we certainly would protect their health coverages, and that during this time we would also take on 100% as the employer, taking on 100% of the cost share of the premium, so that was one less problem that they had to worry about along the way. Beyond that, it goes very much to what Anna, you said earlier, doing the one-on-one touching bases with our staff. Sometimes with questions around operationally what was going on, but every conversation, every contact we having, starting that conversation with a, how are you? Do you have what you need? Do you have the basics? We even talked about on our internal bulletin board to, it's a funny thing to say, and 10 years from now, we'll look back and laugh about it, but do you have toilet paper at your house? Do you have the necessities? And if not, between all of us, we can figure that out, because we've got to make sure we're taking care of you and your basic needs. And it has been amazing how agile that staff has proven to be and how they handled that. The global message really about we're going to take care of you, but also we didn't want to gloss over the reality that I was staying up at 3 o'clock in the morning, lying awake, thinking about our finances, thinking about the fact that we could expect our revenues to drop because of decreased adoptions, or certainly from our surgeries not being performed. That's a major source of revenue for us in our spay and neuter clinic. We do about 7,000 procedures a year. So that's been a big decline for us in terms of revenue. Being questionable around, we've got a great loyal community, but that great loyal community is facing their own economic downturn right now. So what would we expect our donations to look like going forward? So we didn't want to gloss over the fact that this would be a challenging time for us financially. So what we did there was, I'll call it a Cliff Note version of that, but we did get pretty specific about our work around researching the stimulus bills that Congress were looking at to pass, and that our intentions of applying for some of those that we felt met our needs financially. And we did pursue the Paycheck Protection Program, and we explained what that program was. We explained that the spirit of that program was to protect employment of staff, and we wanted them to hear from us. That's a main priority of ours. And so as we went through that process of applying and then receiving that funding, we sent communications out to them about, here's what that program works like, here's what it means for the organization, and again, here's how it's going to impact you. And of course, that was good news for them, because it enabled us to restore them to a full pay, full wage schedule. Even though we continue to do half schedules, we're able to pay them at their full rate. So just continuing to send the message that we're focused on you and we want to keep you safe.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful, because I think there is a lot of just uncertainty. And so I think excellent communication is the answer, and just, really managing change. And so, Michelle, what have you done to manage some of the uncertainty within your team?
And again, we're small, so I realize I can do things maybe a little easier than the larger groups. But from the very beginning, there's no roadmap for this, right? There was nobody's dealt with a pandemic before. There was no roadmap. And so transparency, absolutely. I believe in that in just a regular day. People know if you're trying to get over on them or holding information back, or I think, you can pick that up. So just being vulnerable, even as a leader, and to admit, I don't know that I have all the answers, but we're going to figure this out and we're going to talk it out. And I'm a big component about compassion fatigue and mental health. And I still hate that it's still a taboo subject for a lot of people. A lot of people still are not comfortable. They think it's a sign of weakness, or they think they're going to be judged that they're not able to do their jobs as well as the next person. So from the very beginning, I wanted to talk about mental health and let people know that, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to talk about it. All we really have is each other. And if you don't want to come to me because I'm the boss, pull somebody else aside. But, kind of Merle made me feel good. I'm like, hey, we're kind of doing some of those things, but talk to somebody and check on them. And like Jan said, do you have needs, that I might have something you can use. So, not only are they worried about work, they are worried about their loved ones and their families. And for those of you young children that are having the homeschool, well, God bless you. I can't even imagine, the extra stressor. So one of my coworkers tickles me. She gets an email from a teacher about her son hadn't turned in his assignment. She's like, I'm sorry, these children are feral right now. I'm going to work every day. And I just fell out laughing. But, you just have to do real talk with people, open those lines of communication and let them know that, we all search and struggle with what is the right thing to do. I don't know that we all know what we're all searching for this right thing to do, but really, is there a right thing to do? You look at the recommendations and I kind of started joking about it in the first few weeks because I pull them all together and be like, okay, this is what we do. If a dog comes in, we're going to bathe it and we're going to put it in a kennel. And then like the next day, I'm like, okay, totally don't listen to anything I said yesterday because now we're not going to bathe it and we're going to isolate it. And so you have to be very flexible, and I'm a control freak. So going from one thing to the complete opposite the next day, I was like, okay, but I had to learn, I had to be flexible. I have to be vulnerable and to openly share and say, you know what? I'm freaking out right now today too, and it's okay. And just having those continued conversations and like Jan said, let them know we're looking after each other, and you do matter in all forms, not just work, but your personal, your financial, your emotional. All of that comes together, and just keep it real, because like I said, I don't like it if I'm talking to somebody and I think they're withholding information or, skimming over it. I can take the truth much better than, a lie or a half truth. So just, I have to let go of control, quit searching for what the right thing is, take the recommendations, talk to colleagues, see what other people are doing, and make it work the best you can within the resources you have. Because that's another thing we do on a daily basis. What do? You work with what you have. Not beat yourself up. If you try something and you don't feel like it worked, okay, it didn't work. Move on to the next thing. Don't dwell on it and stay in that, attitude of defeat, and then do some fun to break up the monotony, go back to that. But it's just communication to keep it as real and raw as honest, because if any of us had the roadmap of, what are we going to be doing in 3 weeks? None of us can say that today for sure. So just keep the communication honest, let everybody know, reach out to somebody. If it's not me, I don't care who it is, but reach out to somebody and let it be, you want it to be a safe environment, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so I think connecting meaningfully is just a really important piece of this. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit because I want to be mindful of our time. And so one of the things that I know has kind of happened for all of our industries, we have people who are now typically who work at a center who are now having to work from home. And that is a whole new set of things to work through. So Meryl, what about productivity and working from home? How can we stay productive and help our staff do the same should they have staff who are now newly working from home?
So, excuse me, not everybody is well suited for working from home. Okay, some people love it, other people do not love it at all. So the very first thing to understand is that there are going to be differences in levels of productivity. It's time for us to really set very reasonable expectations of what productivity is going to look like. I think it was Anna who said something about, you're asking them to take on things they never expected to be doing. Okay, they're having to learn new skills. They're having to do different jobs. Their productivity, just by virtue of unfamiliarity, is going to drop a little bit. So the first thing is, don't make yourself crazy about maintaining a certain level of productivity that's arbitrarily based. Instead, look at productivity from a needs perspective. There's that saying, is it a nice to have or is it a need to have? Okay, so when you're thinking about productivity, think about the need to have. It's not going to look the same. You'll be amazed at how many nice to haves have been incorporated all this time that you thought were needs to have. Okay, so setting realistic expectations is one thing. Then for those of you who are working from home, try to develop some morning routines. Okay, you don't want to just sort of drift over to your workspace when you feel like it. Okay, so establish a morning routine, whether that's feeding the kids or walking the dog or having coffee and watching the news, but have a predetermined time when you're going to go to work and get dressed for work. You don't have to be gorgeous, but change out of your PJs. You can wear your sweats, but wear daytime sweats as opposed to nighttime sweats, right?
I mean, full disclosure, I have basketball shorts underneath. Right?
Also, make sure you establish clear boundaries between home life and work life, right? So especially if you've got people around, your kids, your spouse, a housemate, whatever it is, have a signal that means I'm in the office right now. Please don't ask me what's for dinner, okay? Like have some boundaries. Know what your distractions are and try to minimize or mitigate them. So for example, if noise is a distraction for you, get some noise canceling headphones. If you know it's a distraction for you when you see the email pop up and you see the review pane, turn off the email preview pane, right? So just do what you can to minimize your distractions. Make sure to take a lunch break, a defined lunch break. Don't let it morph into 3 hours of watching Netflix, okay? Define it and time it. Make sure to move for 5 minutes each hour. That's super important because you're going to get groggy. And especially a lot of you are not used to sitting at desks. A lot of you are very active in your day. And now all of a sudden you're at a desk. If you don't start getting up and moving once every hour or so, you're going to be sleeping at that desk. And then your productivity is really going to tank. And finally, make sure to decompress at the end of the workday. So end your day by creating a list of the need to haves for tomorrow, right? Organize your workspace. For some people, it's a dining room table, right? So you really have to organize it. Jose has his list there. That's a good thing. But when you're done, be done, okay? And then just walk away from it. The temptation to go back and just do that one last thing is going to be there, but you want to just walk away at the end of your day. So the good thing is with these tips and with any additional tools that you guys find, people are very adaptable and they will adapt to this. They just need the time and space to do it.
Yeah, that's so true. I've been working from home, but when I first started about 9 months ago, I didn't do any of those things. And it was not, I think I told you, I was like, I'm going crazy in this place. So thank you for that. Anna, I'd love to let's hear from you what your silver linings have been and how you are adapting and how your staff, well, in terms of how you are adapting your staff and volunteer force to the changes of COVID-19 and how it's inflicted on your organization.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I am very much an optimist to begin with. So this is actually, finding a silver lining is pretty easy and automatic for me, but I've actually been surprised by how bright the silver lining is in this case. I think one of the most important pieces of what we have learned from all of this is that I have learned what my staff is capable of. I've seen some of my staff members step into things and show talents and creativity and resilience that that have just amazed me. But more importantly, it's shown them that. And I think that having staff understand that we can weather this as an organization because we've put in place a culture that is resilient and it's well defined and it was intentional when we built it. It's led to a very resilient organization, and it's shown them things that they're capable of doing that they weren't doing on a daily basis because it wasn't part of either their jobs or our organization's operations. And so I think that's one of the main silver linings. And then I also, I think that there has been a shift with not just in my organization, but in so many organizations where we are watching our shelter staff really start to make a shift towards trusting the public and trusting other organizations and trusting leadership. When this is handled well, which I think, at least in our organization, I really feel that it has been, and I think that has been the case in many shelters across the country. It's leading to this feeling of, having to let go of control also leads to trusting those forces that are making things happen. In this case, it's a lot of the public who are taking animals and fostering them and then finding them homes. And it's our adoption counselors letting go of controlling every adoption. And so those are some things that I think have been really, really beautiful. But then also the way that we've had to prepare staff and then everything we've implemented along the way, which has been in some cases daily adjustments or change from one day to the next, like Michelle said. And I think that what we're seeing is that we're creating some new habits as an organization and as individual employees that are going to make us a stronger organization when we come out of this. And I think every organization, if we're approaching this crisis properly, has that ability to emerge from this with better policies. You know, this is time to review policies, review programs, review contracts, review everything that we're doing and ask ourselves why we're doing it and how we could do it differently or better, how we can adapt it to a new world, because frankly, we've come up with some really creative ways now to raise money or to engage our community. And those are all things that I'm watching my staff sort of from afar, since I'm not on site as often as some of them are. And we have, our organization is split between an off-site administrative office space and the shelters. So we were already kind of divided, but we've created even better habits of coming together electronically, checking in with each other. We even have an automated email that comes from my account to all of my offsite workers or semi-offsite workers that has 5 questions for them, including, you know, what were their accomplishments for the day, what are their priorities for the next day, what they did to divide work time versus home time, you know, so like how did they start work and end work, and what are the self-care practices that they did that day or would be doing that evening. So we're creating this culture of we're adding to the culture we already have. We're really strengthening that culture of trust and of caring for oneself and others. And really, I think just we're going to emerge from this with a much better organization and a staff that is resilient and knows that they're resilient.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And so we're going to do 2 more questions before we go to the questions. And so, Jen, what are some positive impacts you've seen as a result of your team's effort in this new normal? And then I'm going to have Nancy kind of round us off at the end.
You know, everyone else has seen the same thing. You're absolutely right. A team doesn't know how strong they are until they really have been put to the test of it. And we've all certainly been put to the test of it. I know that for us, we used a lot of this time because the shelter, most of our pets, 60% of them were in foster. The pace of things was slower for us, and we used it to trial. I'm sorry. We used it to trial some habits that we had hoped. You can hear my phone in the background. I still have a landline. I'm probably the only one in Virginia that still have a landline, and I'm sure that's some sales call. But anyway, there we go. Sorry about that. You know, we trialed what I'll call a concierge service. What we realized was because we had more time on our hands and we had limited exposure to our public, a lot of our processes started really early on with first an email contact and then phone interviews with those who were interested in adoptions. And by the time they came in on site to really meet the animals that we had proposed that they would be good matches, we'd already built a relationship with them. So starting that relationship earlier and understanding the needs and desires of those seeking adoptions and having it paired up in a way that when they finally got there on site, it was a one-on-one concierge experience to where we took them and introduced them. Our staff absolutely loved it. They had had that idea for some time. We used this time to trial it. They loved it. Those families coming in, those adopters coming in, they certainly liked that individualized attention. And we think the pets ended up in better places with their homes because we feel really good about the matches because we were able to build that relationship. So going forward, as we talk about reopening, we are already looking at how do we change our staff around so that we don't need more staff, but our staff have learned to do things differently, and they have raised the bar on their own capabilities. And so we are looking to restructure that staff a little bit so that we can do more of that individualized attention and building relationships with those who seek pets from our shelters.
Very cool. And so this whole thing has been about staff, you know, morale, volunteer morale. And so Nancy, how can organizations set up self-care or wellness programs for all employees during this stressful, physically distant time? What is that? What is a roadmap for folks who are on the call who like, I don't even know where to start?
Well, I think what we ended up doing is we decided, because of all the emails going back and forth and all the announcements and websites, we decided to make a schedule. So once a week, we have our director of HR and our director of volunteer services write an email just on self-care. So it might be a list of free links on exercise apps that you can do. It might be a tip or two or a nice article about meditation or something. Of course, we're in Northern California near Berkeley, so I can say that. And then what we ended up doing is we have a staff person who is a trained yoga instructor, and she conducts through Zoom once a week a 1-hour session for any staff or volunteers to just get some stretching exercises, some back exercises, and just to show that we care about the staff and we want them to have good habits, even once we reopen, if we, reopen to the public in a couple of weeks. So we did what, again, sharing free web services, reminding them about our employee assistance program. And I think, again, to what everybody's saying is to be honest and sincere with your staff and start meetings by checking in with how people are doing. I'm so happy to be able to do the calls. They're only 15 minutes at the most. And again, we ask them, how are they coping with staying at home? How would they rate our level of communication with their supervisor as well as with their organization? And then the last question is the most important. What else can we do to help them cope, or what else do they need? And it might be something where they just need to talk about something going on with their family, or they need some equipment because they realized they needed a bigger monitor at home because they've been working longer. So I think being sincere, being consistent, like everybody says, and I think, tapping your own resources. And then last but not least, a free lunch every once in a while for the staff that work in our shelter. We down to core staff. We pay and have a lunch service that we pay for them to have lunch, so they don't have to worry about getting gowned up and masked up and going out and finding food. And then I also send cards to my staff to say I miss them and they're doing a great job. So
I think that's just so cool. Like, especially the employee assistance program, if that's something that you usually it can be part of your insurance package, that's something we are really encouraging folks within Best Friends to use. And I just think so much of what you guys are doing at Marin Humane is just really, really special and really great. And so especially the wellness part of it all. And I think a lot of times folks think about like financial resources and they think of like we don't have money, but like, do you have time to make the call and ask those 3 questions? And the best way, it's kind of like with all of our shelter operations, we don't want to guess, we want data, we want some kind of data point to inform what we do. So for those on the call who are like, I don't know where to start, a great place to start is just to ask your team, how are they? What do they need? So that you can start to just get a better understanding of how to deliver whatever that is, if you can, in a meaningful, really strategic, targeted way. So thank all of you for bringing your hearts and your souls to this. We appreciate it. We're going to actually start checking out some questions. But yeah, so it's just so critical. This, I think in our industry, we really focus on naturally animals and, in our community, but really putting this focus on the staff and making it's not an either or, it's an and. And in order to be like the most functional, impactful, sustainable organization, thinking about what kind of intentional strategies we have to cultivate and really support our team is just so important. And so, all right, it's looking like I got some questions. So here's the first one. Do you have any advice for managing remote staff members who do not work well remotely? We want to be flexible with our expectations of productivity in a way that is understanding, but also fair to the people who are still working in the shelter. So I know, Meryl, you gave some insights, but what about one of the shelter directors? Like, what has been some of your experience? So yeah, Nancy, managing remote staff now.
Well, one of the things is we took the opportunity to realize that we had so many staff who were behind on all their training. And we have a lot of training that we use that's webinar based. So we really said, here's your time to get caught up on all those training modules. And so we can track their hours, we can track their certificates of completion. So we had all the direct supervisors really emphasize that if there aren't any other projects that they can work on, but at the same time, if there are projects that they would love to help, data collection, cleaning those files out, tracking some things, doing research for us. We've also assigned some of our staff who love those projects the time to do it. So, I think going back to basics is saying, here's a reality, you have to work from home and we want to make sure you have the right equipment, but here's all the training that we want you to get done in the first 4 weeks that we're going to be in lockdown. So that's what we did, is encourage them to get all that training done.
Really
And
cool.
I'll add to, you know, I think it is hard when you're, I think it's a hard mentality to get out of as a boss, that we need to control the people who work for us. We need to control their time, their productivity, and everything else. I think we need to change our expectation of productivity in this time, and really set expectations that are clear. So I have some people who are phenomenal, and they've just blown me away at how productive they've been at home. And I have some staff members who have really struggled, some of which, you know, it's not necessarily their fault, but they have a child at home or children who are demanding tons of attention, or they have a spouse who's also working in a critical business, and so they're juggling time. But what we have found has been really helpful is sharing tons of resources with strategies for time, you know, working from home, time management, a lot of what Meryl shared about, you know, how you create a routine around your work time. But we've also, that email that I have that goes out every day provides that structure for them as well. So it asks them to set realistic priorities for the next day, and then checks in with them at the end of the day and asks them, you know, have you gotten through them? And then I'm watching those, and I'm able to say, okay, I'm noticing you're not getting through your priorities. What can we do to help? You know, can I help you figure out a structure? Can I help you figure out a routine? Do you need more tools? Do you need a place to go? Can you come sit in one of our empty offices? So I think it just, they're, again, coming back to that theme of trust. Not only are we learning to trust the public, but as supervisors, we need to also learn to trust our employees and not control every moment of their productive time.
Yeah, I agree. It's a shift, and I think it's a really important one, because I think we're going to see more and more working from home statuses in just general workforce, but I think in animal welfare, when we talk about some of the things that may be a new normal, I think we're going to have more roles that are reporting at home. And you hit it, it's trust. It's about setting expectations, trust, and making sure you can find ways to make them successful and support them. One of the other questions, it's more of a request, and I think it was Jen, I think this might be a request for you. To the speaker that mentioned that they emailed volunteers and discussed changes and explained why they would be going in effect, is it possible to get a copy of the changes and explanations that were given? So if that applies to any of you, if you want to email me, so that way we can make sure that gets kind of folded in, that would be really great. Yeah, it's always nice to have, you know, something that you don't have to create from scratch. And then I think, oh yes, Nancy.
And I would just add, we do a separate communication once a week to all our volunteers to keep in touch. And it could be, you know, what was a funny thing you did this week, or it could be the serious announcements. But we also make sure whatever we send to the volunteers, we share with all our staff, so they see what the communication is and what we're trying to do to have this team and connection, even though we're all separate physically.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things that I think about and I try and remember is, if I'm sending an all staff email, there's probably information that's pertinent to my volunteers, and vice versa. Because if we want to operate as like one team, which is not always the easiest thing to do, then we have to just make sure, like, are we offering certain workshops to staff? How do we make sure that the volunteers are in the loop, so everyone's aptitude, knowledge is level set, to just mitigate confusion and miscommunication. Another question we got is, we have found at Best Friends Life-Saving Center in Salt Lake City that we are better able to get animals adopted by involving the foster caregivers in the adoption counseling sessions via video chat. What are your thoughts on that as a way to empower your community to be a part of life-saving? Does anyone have a thought on this?
I think it's the new future.
Yeah. So let's see. So yeah, what are your thoughts as a way to empower your community to be part of life-saving? I think you're right. I think this is, right now, it's about cultivating trust. You know, when I first started in this industry, it was 10-page applications. Like, we're gonna assume you're guilty before we even think that you may be able to, like, responsible enough to care for one of these animals. And I think what we're seeing is we've had to rely on the community, and we've had to, you know, really expand ourselves to be more trusting. And so I think that this is going to be a continuous exercise in trusting the community first, and starting with trust, you know, and that doesn't mean just like being irresponsible, but I think it's just a really powerful thing when we lead from that, as opposed to leading and letting fear inform from inception what we do and don't do. So those were, oh, go ahead, Michelle.
I was just going to say something because we don't have a foster program before COVID hit. So one thing, we have to educate our staff about being non-judgmental and having those conversations. We have had a few fosters that we've had to, they've done meet and greets or whatever, and they're like, oh, I don't think they should get this animal. So that was a kind of something we weren't expecting, that we had to, we're thankful for our fosters, and yes, we value their opinions and, their conversations with the potential adopter, but we've also had to explain to them, we've been doing this a long time. You can't, always judge a book by its cover. And that was something I wasn't expecting that we had to deal with. And the majority of them, I mean, our adoptions have been great. I feel like they're almost getting adopted faster because people are seeing them in homes, visualizing them in homes, getting a whole lot more information than I find out about these animals at the shelter. But that was kind of the one little hiccup that we weren't prepared for. So I just use it as an additional way to educate the community, about what we do on a daily basis all the time anyways. And most of them are very receptive, and it's the way you explain it to them and educate them. But that was just something I wasn't really prepared for, I guess, by not having a foster program pre-COVID, you can't really be judgy and judgmental and say no. And that, no, we don't have a 12-page application, to adopt, because they're like, I like this person, but where's the adoption application? We don't have one, so also used it as an additional opportunity to help educate the public.
Yes, thank you for that insight, and congratulations on starting a foster program out of all of this. That's a really powerful thing, because we know foster is a really integral tool to have in our life-saving belt. So just thank you each and every one of you for taking the time to share with us today. Again, I think one of the key takeaways that I have with this is, when we think about staff, culture, morale, and all of that, it starts with us. So what are we doing to take care of ourselves and model the kind of behaviors we want to see in other people, which include like unplugging, having some self-awareness, all of those things, being gentle on yourself. Just because if you're in a leadership role doesn't mean you have to have all the answers and be perfect. You're a human too. And to just, give ourselves the room to really experience what we're experiencing, feel what we're feeling. And, to what you were saying, Nancy, like those 3 questions, if we can encourage everyone as a to-do, an action item to have it, to walk away and start, whether it's through SurveyMonkey or whether you're going to do Marin Humane status and call everybody, which I love. I think starting there and really understanding what is going on with your team is going to really help all of you start to cultivate, a stronger connection to them and them with each other. Because the one thing that these kinds of disasters, and COVID is just like a widespread pandemic disaster, they have the ability to bring us together. You're not fighting about who left, who didn't wash the cat bowls, because you have the big picture in mind. The key is, how do we keep that? How do we continue to cultivate all of these connections with each other? And so in the same way we're thinking about animal welfare and what's the new normal, think about that in terms of your culture and the dynamics that you have with each other and with your teams. Now is the time to really, put that beautiful lightning in a bottle and capture it, because there's a lot of really cool things happening right now. So thank you all again. We'll be here same day, Thursday, same time, 6 p.m. Eastern, with a whole new topic. Again, you'll be getting a survey right after this. Thank you all for sharing your time with us, and have a good evening or rest of your afternoon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.